Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another ship fitting guide for Eve Echoes. Today though, we're doing things a little bit differently. Instead of looking at just one particular ship, we're going to be looking at an entire line of destroyers. Now, we've already done this for the Thrasher, the Coercer, and the Cormorant, so I felt it was only fair that we had a look at the Gallente Federation's Catalyst, this weird-looking ship that you see on screen now. Hey, it's a Gallente ship. They kind of have the, weird is their thing, is what I'm trying to say. Boy howdy is this a weird one. Anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the Catalyst, how to get started with it and how to fit one, and then where you would progress up the ship tree there through the other different types of Catalysts. So if this looks like the kind of ship you might be interested in, this is kind of a guide to everything you need to know about the Catalyst line of destroyers. Now, if you do enjoy this video or find it useful, let me know by hitting like on it, subscribe to the channel for all things Eve Echoes, and ding that notification bell so that you never miss an upload. Let me know what topics you want me to cover in a future video, either by commenting down below or finding me on social media, and let me know if there's a particular ship you want to see me cover in a ship fitting guide as well, same methods. Finally, if you do want to go the extra mile to help support this channel, you can do so by joining us on Patreon. Details are on screen now. That said and done then, let's talk about the Gallente Federation Catalyst. Now, like the Thrasher, Coercer, and Cormorant, the Catalyst is the Gallente Federation's mainline destroyer. This means the first one is found up the destroyer branch at Tech Level 3. Being a Tech Level 3 ship means it can be insured for repairs. If you lose this in combat, you can use the repair vouchers to bring it back. And being Tech Level 3 means it's also seeded at every single one of the ITCs. You can buy this for about 175,000 ISK. You don't need other players to build it for you. Now, it does have some pretty cool skins here, as you can see on screen now. I'm using the titanium silver one, which is one of the skins that you can get through the Museum Arcana. It's only a 15-day length skin, but considering you get it essentially free, I do think it looks pretty cool and it stands out, although looking cool is one of the last things I think of when it comes to the Catalyst. This is such a weird ship, like how off-center and asymmetrical that one is. But hey, enough about how it looks, let's talk about how it flies. Now, looking at the Catalyst's fitting profile, you can see that like the other Tech 3 destroyers, we've got 3 high slots, 2 mid slots, and 3 low slots. Defense is actually pretty solid on this thing, it's more so than a lot of the other destroyers at Tech 3. Shield is only 700, but the armour is 844 and the structure is 861. That's a lot of beating to get through. Ultimately, this is one of the tankier destroyers available to you at Tech Level 3. Armour tanking, though, is definitely the way forward on this. I wouldn't bother with the shields. That 700 shield is not particularly much to work with. Signature radius is 64.9, making it a fairly large target for a destroyer, and a flight velocity of 244 is not overly fast. That's very much a middling speed when it comes to destroyers. You get faster, but you do get slower. Scan resolution, though, is something definitely notable about the Catalyst, 528. That is a huge scan resolution that means this thing locks on surprisingly quickly. Finally, a warp speed of 4.5 AU per second does make it fairly quick to relocate from place to place. Now, looking at the trait description, you can see here that the Catalyst has a roll bonus, just like all of the other mainline destroyers, of a 25% increase to the optimal range of the mainline weapon. In the case of the Catalyst, that is small railgun optimal range. Again, like then the Cormorant, we're looking at small railgun operation being the skill that gives bonuses on this ship. Like the Cormorant, it is a plus 6% small railgun damage, but it's a 5% increase to small railgun accuracy fall-off this time, rather than optimal range, which does apply a couple of differences here. That means with small railgun operation trained all the way up to level 5, that's an additional 30% small railgun damage, which is kind of like having a 4th turret, and the small railgun accuracy fall-off gives an additional 25% accuracy fall-off range, which obviously that's to both accuracy fall-offs, the one that takes you to 50 and the one that takes you to 6%, so that does add a total of 25% to each of those. It's quite a considerable bit of range to add on there. Destroyer command bonus as well, as you can see here, is plus 5% armor. So for each level you have in Destroyer command, additional 5% extra armor hit points. So 844 plus up to 25% on that again. Makes it, again, astonishingly tanky if you have the right skills for it. So let's have a look at actually how to fit the Catalyst in terms of PvE. Now for the high slots here, I've gone for 3 Mark V small rifled railguns. Now the reason I've gone for rifled over snub-nosed is because of those range bonuses. Obviously with the Catalyst having a roll bonus of 25% additional optimal range, and then up to 25% again on the accuracy fall-off, that applies quite a lengthy amount of range to those railguns. You can see here that with the skills I've got trained, that's currently giving me an optimal range of 12.15 and an accuracy fall-off of nearly 7 kilometers, meaning 12 kilometers is our sort of optimal, up to 19 takes us down to 50%, and then it's all the way out to 26, 27 kilometers that will actually take us to the final accuracy fall off there. That's a lot of range for a destroyer, and I think honestly well worth going for. Yeah, the damage is a little bit lower at 87.74 compared to using the snub-nosed, but it means we don't have to get quite as personal, quite as aggressive and up in their face as we would here. We can keep a little bit of range between us and our opponent and kind of go almost for a semi-kiting build. That said, you are ultimately going to be looking to orbit around about the 12 to 13 kilometer mark here, where it's possible, but if required, you can pull back a bit further and still be able to dish out damage from quite an extensive period of range. Then for the low slots, I've gone for a Mark V magnetic field stabilizer. This of course is the weapon upgrade system for railguns. Having this fitted gives a cold 5% increase to DPS. You can then activate this particular module for a 7.06% boost to the DPS as well, which does push this almost over the 100 DPS mark. Obviously, with that kind of range, very, very useful from a tech level 3 destroyer to be able to put out that kind of damage. Now, in order to move and keep a sort of range using that, maintaining a decent speed at that 13 kilometers orbit, we're using a Mark V small afterburner. Having this active at all times allows us just to maintain that range and take fewer hits. We're not exactly speed tanking with this thing. It is a little bit too big on the signature radius and not quite fast enough thanks to its basic flight velocity to actually actively speed tank, but obviously the faster we're moving, the less damage we take from things like missiles, and the less likely it is that turrets are going to get a firm hit on us, which means less damage overall. Finally then in the low slots, a Mark V small armour repairer rounds things out nicely. Ultimately, as I said, this is very much an armour tanking ship, not a shield tank. The shield is a little bit too small to worry about on this one. Go for the armour repairer instead. This just means that any damage I start taking onto my armour, I can repair up using this, and the shields should start recharging naturally in the background as well. Armour, of course, does have some fairly high resistances on it too, meaning it takes somewhat less damage than shield does against most weapon types. Then looking at the mid slots, the one that's most important in the mid slots here is a Mark V stasis weatherfire. This means anything that reaches that 11.2 kilometer optimal range ultimately gets slowed by 51%. That allows the rifled railguns, which do have slightly slower tracking, to stay on that target and deal better damage to it. So if you're orbiting at, say, the 11 kilometer mark, you're maximizing your weapon range and still getting the weather fire on them. Very useful against faster moving targets like smaller frigates. Things like, for example, the Slashes of the world and the Condors, that kind of thing. The second mid-slot, I've put a Mark V small energy Nosferatu. Now admittedly, the optimal range and accuracy fall-off does give this a theoretical maximum of 8 kilometers, which means for the most part we are going to be outside of that range. That means that ultimately this small energy Nosferatu is somewhat optional to this fit, and if you don't have one at hand, do just shove in a second stasis weatherfire if needs be, or leave the slot empty. I've got it in here just in case I start getting drained quite heavily by other people or the rats in PvE. If they start draining my capacitor too much, I can pull in temporarily, come to a smaller orbit of say 4, 5, 6 kilometers, activate the energy Nosferatu to refill my tank, and then pull back to safety to continue the fight. That's just the option I've gone for here, and that gives, as I said, an 87.74 DPS, and then our defense is a whopping 3,117. You can see that thanks to the skill there in armor, I've got over 1,000 armor hit points, which does make this astonishingly tanky. The Catalyst is of course just the first in an entire line of destroyers. If we go up from tech level 3 into tech level 4 on the Gallente ship tree, you will of course see the Catalyst 2. Now the Catalyst 2 is a straight up upgrade over the Catalyst. I do actually really like the colour on this one. That sort of rusty brown is a really interesting addition to the Catalyst line. Looks a little bit different to the others. Looking at its fitting profile here, you can see immediately that not only has it gained the power grid and mechanical rigs, which we'll come to later on when we look at the Catalyst Navy issue and how you should ultimately be fitting those, but it has gained an additional high slot. We've gone from 3 high slots up to 4. That is straight away an entire 33% increase on DPS. The example I like to give here is that if you had 3 turrets doing 10 damage each, that's a total of 30 damage. You've now got 4 turrets, and if they're still doing 10 damage each, that's now 40 damage. So you've gone from 30 to 40, 33% increase, and that is huge. Now, the defense has gone up a little bit here, and it's gone up across the board, mainly across armor and structure. Those are now nearing on the 900 mark each. The shield is still sitting at 720. The signature radius has dropped a little bit down to 61, but you're still not going to be speed tanking anytime soon with a signature radius that large. Flight velocity, though, has shot right the way up to 278 meters per second. Scan resolution has also had a rather nice buff up to 667. This thing locks astonishingly quickly. Warp speed as well, finally, going from 4.5 up to 5.0, just means you move from A to B that little bit quicker. Looking at the traits, we've got the same catalyst roll bonus as you'd expect, 25% small railgun optimal range, and we've still got the 5% armor increase from Destroyer command, but now small railgun operation has changed things up slightly. This time we've gone up to a 7.5% small railgun accuracy fall-off, which gives you even more range. Having obviously small railgun operation at a full level of 5 on the Catalyst would have given you a 25% accuracy fall-off increase. Here, having it at 5 will give you a 37.5% accuracy fall-off. Extra range, allowing you to keep a little bit of extra safety and still be hitting with those railguns at some quite astonishing distances. We then have the small railgun tracking speed added in here as well. This is not present on the Catalyst, it's only on the Catalyst 2, 7.5% increase to small railgun tracking speed. That means in those instances where you do need to dive in and start using the Nosferatu to drain up your energy, for example, you are more likely to be able to hit. It means that your railguns, your rifled railguns, are going to be better at hitting faster moving targets, which is just outright a DPS increase. It won't actually show up on the ship as a DPS increase, but it means you are more likely to be actually giving solid hits and doing closer to your actual effective DPS. Obviously, the DPS that you see on your sheet is completely, it's based on optimal situations. Optimal situations almost never happen in combat, so anything that helps you get closer to that optimal situation, in this case by making it easier to hit your target, means your effective DPS is going to be better. Now, it's worth noting here that the small railgun operation top part here, small railgun damage, is only 2.5% this time, down from, what was it, 5%? 6% on the previous one? So that looks like it's had quite a nerf. Not ultimately, because remember, you still have that additional turret. You're getting less from the skill rather than the full 30%. Here you're only getting, how does that work out? 12.5%? So you're getting less than half from the skill, but you are getting that additional turret. It's still a net increase on DPS. Quite considerable still, and well worth upgrading into. Of course, though, the Catalyst 2 is not the last in the line here. Once you hit tech level 5, we come up to the Catalyst Guardian, which is something that I will cover in a future video. I'll put a link on screen now to talk about the Coercer Guardian. The Catalyst Guardian and the Coercer Guardian are both very similar ships. That video will explain what these are all about. It's all about supporting your fleet rather than individual actual capabilities. The Catalyst Guardian is not a solo player ship. The Catalyst Navy issue, however, very much is, and if we have a look at this one, again, you get some really cool, interesting designs here, this kind of camo effect to it. Again, I'm a little bit confused when I see a spaceship painted in camo. In this case, how big are the trees that you're hiding this in? Anyway, attributes and fittings, like with the Catalyst 2, we've still got those 2 power grid and 2 mechanical rigs, we've still got 4 turrets, 4 high slots and 3 low slots, but we have now got 3 mid slots. Now, I'll be honest, on the Catalyst, the mid slots tend to be a bit superfluous, but it does mean you can now have 2 Webifiers and still then cram in a warp disruptor, for example, or you could theoretically just put in 3 warp disruptors if you're absolutely adamant to lock someone down and stop them escaping. Defense has massively shot up across the board here. The shield has gone over 1,100, the armor and the structure are both closing in on 1,400. Much tankier vessel. Signature radius has also dropped below 60 meters for the first time at 59.2, meaning it is just that little bit more difficult to hit, although it is still a fairly large ship. You're not going to be speed tanking with this. Flight velocity has dropped a little from the Catalyst 2 to 265, and the scan resolution has come down slightly with it, but that's something we'll come back to in a second. Finally then, warp speed again drops down to 4.5, does take a little bit longer to relocate compared to the Catalyst 2, but overall, things here are an upgrade because the trait descriptions. Looking again, we've got that same roll bonus that we'd expect from a Catalyst, 25% increase to small railgun optimal range, and the small railgun operation bonus still applies that 7.5% small railgun accuracy fall-off that the Catalyst 2 had, giving it that same range as the Catalyst 2. It still gets the tracking speed bonus that the Catalyst 2 had, but now the railgun operation bonus gives you small railgun damage of plus 5 per level. Rather than plus 2.5% per level, it's now plus 5, meaning at full level 5 that is a 25% increase to the damage. And again, that is over 4 turrets on the Catalyst Navy issue compared to only 3 on the original Catalyst. So again, massive DPS increase there for that. You'll notice then that Destroyer Command still gives you the 5% armour increase, which on top of that already whopping 1,367, you're getting an additional 25% there if your Destroyer Command is at level 5, plus you then get scan resolution and sensor strength at 5% per level, up to 25% too. So yeah, sure, the native scan resolution has gone down from 600 and whatever it was to 549, but by the time you add on the 25% that you're getting for Destroyer Command, it does actually get a bonus. So that said, let's have a look at fitting this one. Fitting a Catalyst Navy issue is a fairly basic exercise in just extrapolating upon what we showcased for the original Catalyst. As such, the high slots we've gone for are still small rifled railguns, though I have upgraded these to musket small rifled railguns, which are the storyline level variant. Storyline are those missions where once you've done a load of the standard encounters, you can eventually get like a little scroll thing that you use. It gives you a special mission. During that mission, you occasionally come across elite pirates. If you destroy those ships and loot them, they often have little green icons on some of the loot. And at the end of the mission, you get given a chest that contains random bits of loot that you can either sell or equip to your ships. Now, because these are fairly easy to get hold of, they're cheap on the market too. They're not overly expensive, so fitting 4 musket small rifled railguns seemed like just the right thing to do on a ship as powerful as a Catalyst Navy issue. We still got that great optimal range of 12.15 kilometers, an accuracy fall-off of 7.54, meaning we can comfortably be going as far as 20 kilometers and actually beyond up to about the 27-28 mark, and still be able to deal a decent amount of damage. Obviously, the further you go, the less damage you deal. But 20 kilometers is not a bad range at all to have sort of 50% effectiveness. Obviously, we ideally want to be sitting closer to that 12 mark, but it's nice to have the option if we need to outrange someone who has short-range weaponry, for example. Now, talking about outranging people, our mid-slots here are still Mark V stasis Weberfires. The aim here being that if anyone's a little bit too fast for our liking, someone's coming up to you with some really powerful drones, or some very fast ships like, say, the Slasher 2 or the Condor, that kind of thing, you can apply those Weberfires to slow them down and just help your turrets hit them a little bit better. Now, because we've got the 3rd slot this time around, a Mark V Warp Disruptor just seemed like a nice thing to put in there to help give this a bit of PvP opportunity as well. We've still got the 2 stasis Weberfires like we've had before, but we've now got a 3rd slot that we can put a Warp Disruptor in. Now, yeah, of course, you could go for something like one of the storyline faction or officer level Warp Disruptors, but those are a lot more expensive than a Mark III or Mark V. I had a Mark V lying around. And ultimately, if you're starting out in PvP and just giving, sort of dipping your toes in the water, so to speak, you'll probably find that most ships you go up against, other destroyers, etc., frigates, maybe even some of the weaker cruisers, probably don't have anything in the way of warp stability. Go a standard Mark V Warp Disruptor is probably enough to do the job and lock them in position. The low slots otherwise are pretty much the same as you'd expect. We've got a Mark V small afterburner here to help us move around the battlefield that little bit faster, a Mark V magnetic field stabilizer to give that little bit of extra DPS and we can activate it for a burst, and finally a Gorget small armor repairer. The reason for this one ultimately is, again, it's topping up that damage, any damage that we take onto the armor, and because it's a bigger ship with bigger armor tank, it made sense to fit a better small armor repairer on there in order to actually keep that one topped up nicely. A big armor tank, nice heavy active small armor repairer means we're not going to be losing that tank anytime soon. Now, I mentioned that the Catalyst Navy issue, like the Catalyst 2, has rigs, and we'd have a look at them in the Catalyst Navy issue section. So let's have a look at those. Now, for the power grid rigs, I've gone for a railgun collision accelerator, straight up damage bonus of 12.5%, and then a railgun burst aerator, an activation time adjustment of a negative 7.5%. Now, the reason we don't just put 2 of the collision accelerators just to get extra damage is because these rigs have a penalty. Using more than one of this type of module or rig on a single ship will result in a penalty to the final effect. That doesn't care whether it's a railgun collision accelerator 1, 2, 3, or prototype. If you have multiple railgun collision accelerators, they will have a negative effect on each additional one fitted. That means in this case, if I'd put 2 of these on, instead of 12.5 plus 12.5 equals 25, it'll actually apply a penalty to the second one, which will make it less effective. You'd actually be looking more like 12.5% plus 8%. It's a big drop for the second one. Ultimately, once you've got 3 rigs, yeah, you might decide to go for a second collision accelerator in one of them, but since we've only got 2, we may as well go to the other side of the DPS equation. Obviously, DPS stands for damage per second, and if you want to increase your DPS, you can either increase the amount of damage done, or you can increase the amount of shots fired in that duration. Hence, the burst aerator increases the amount of shots we fire over a period of time, which just results in more damage being applied to the target. Now, for the mechanical rigs, we've gone for a polycarbon engine housing prototype. We had a couple of prototypes lying around here for a reduction to the inertia modifier, which allows us to orbit in a sharper range if needs be. It's actually mainly for manual piloting. It just means I can turn around a lot faster and move it to where I need to go to. And the second one is an auxiliary thruster prototype. Flight velocity adjustment means we move a little bit faster. We're a little bit harder to hit against other turrets, and we can escape some of that application on missiles. Well worth fitting into a ship like this. Obviously, I've just gone for the prototypes here because I had them lying around, and you know what, I can't spend all of my HISC on every single ship that I get. But obviously, if you're using a Catalyst Navy issue as your ship of choice, then 100% you want to fit the best rigs possible. Do put those level 1s in there. They are worth the investment over the prototypes. Prototypes are great for trying out a particular fitting, but you do want to upgrade to those tech level 1s when you can. Now, you'll see that with this particular fit, we get 162.3 DPS. That is based on being at that optimal range of 12.15 kilometers, and it gradually falls off to 50% of that, about 80 DPS, once we hit about the 20 kilometer mark. Obviously, the further you go out, the lower that DPS goes. It's nice to have that variance, but we are ultimately going to be trying to stay around the 12 to 13 kilometer mark. This is not a capacitor stable ship. It's 2 minutes 37 seconds, so if everything is switched on, if you've got the warp disruptor, the 2 stasis weather fires, the afterburner, the small armor repairer, and the magnetic field stabilizer, if everything in there is active, your capacitor will last for a total of 2 minutes 37. Chances are, though, you're never actually going to have all of that switched on at any one time. I mean, theoretically, all you should ever really have on in a PvE is ultimately the afterburner and the 2 stasis weather fires. In PvP, you might have the 2 stasis weather fires and the warp disruptor on, but things like the armor repairer and the magnetic field stabilizer are the kind of thing you should be switching on and off as and when you need them. So they're not running all the time, and by not running all the time, helps you maintain capacitor stability. Yeah, sure, you could put a Nosferatu in there, but remember, a Nosferatu has an optimal range of 4 and an accuracy fall-off of 2, anything beyond 8 kilometers, and it's not really worth the time. And we're aiming to be at 13 kilometers, which means the Nosferatu isn't really going to be doing its thing. You'd have to actually dive in close, use that Nosferatu to pull your energy reserves back up, refill your capacitor, then pull back to safety. And yeah, you can do that. I'm not going to say you can't do that, and for a dedicated PvE fit, you may find that that is something that you find useful and is worth trying. That said, I've been using this Catalyst Navy issue in a few Tier 5, Tier 6 encounters, and it does hold its own quite comfortably in those. Tier 7 does require a bit more effort and work to it, but this is only a tech level 5 ship, and you can still do it with manual piloting, learning to outrange and control the distance between you and your targets. It's doable. I will do a video on it eventually, I assure you. Anyway, that really does wrap up everything that I want to say then about the Catalyst series of destroyers. These are an awesome series of destroyers, very powerful, a lot of variability in what you can do with them, and using those rifled railguns you can actually do a surprising amount of damage from a decent range away. I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of the Catalyst's appearance. Many Gallente ships don't really appeal to my personal aesthetics, but in fairness, it's not the worst looking ship in New Eden either. That definitely goes to the Imicus. Sorry, Imicus fanboys, you stand alone on this one. Anyway, of course, those are just my thoughts and opinions regarding the Catalyst series of destroyers. You may like these a lot more than I do, you may struggle with them. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below as well. What do you use as a fit on these? Have you been running a Catalyst Navy issue in PvP and got a whole load of kill marks that you want to show off? Let me know all that and more in the comment section below, and come find me on Twitter. Any screenshots you've got of this ship, again, hashtag CSKL. Finally, when I do these videos where it's me talking about a ship that I've purchased, I do often sell them at a madly reduced cost with all of the fittings and rigs where possible. So if you fancy keeping an eye out for a ship like this and trying to snag yourself a bargain, get onto the Catskull Cartel Discord. I do all kinds of crazy auctions in the Benzie's Bazaar section of that Discord, where you might be able to pick yourself up a really cool ship dirt cheap. Anyway, folks, that about wraps up everything I wanted to say here. Happy sailing, and see you in New Eden!